I am a three-time loser. I voted for him three times. I believed in his vision. Now, I mean, everything is going wrong.
It looked good, like initially, and then it's like you woke up Monday morning and it's like, oh, we're bombing Iran now. Freaking gas is pushing $5 a gallon.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. It is not a good sign when some of your most loyal supporters start calling themselves losers for supporting you in the first place. That was part of a new focus group held by our friend Sarah Longwell of The Bulwark with Trump voters who feel abandoned and betrayed as Donald Trump ignores his campaign promises and doubles and triples down on the unpopular war with Iran. Many of them, like the rest of Americans, are increasingly alarmed by his behavior as well. Take a look.
I'm really getting concerned about the war in Iran, being in this situation where I've sold my house and I have this lump of money that I have, set aside to build my new house. And then we go to war in Iran and the prices are just going up, but my pile of money is not getting any bigger. Some of the stuff that's been happening is just so shocking and seemingly out of nowhere to me. The Venezuela situation or the war in Iran or just some of the other rhetoric. It's just really bizarre, and there's not a whole lot of good stuff happening.
So this thing that used to aid Trump, right, the blur of mayhem, is now hurting him with his own supporters. So as you can imagine, if his one-time voters are mad, the rest of the country, especially swing voters and independents, are furious. As we have been reporting, tens of thousands of Americans are on the streets today all across our country as they express their outrage at Donald Trump's policies and presidency. It is an outrage that is also revealing itself in new polling that for any politician, even Donald Trump, is devastating. A new Pew poll out today finds that just 34% of Americans approve of Donald Trump's performance as president. That is the lowest number Pew has registered for Donald Trump in his second term. It follows an AP poll that found just 33% of Americans approve of the job Donald Trump is doing as president. Those excruciatingly low numbers are driven in no small part by the war with Iran and its economic impacts. Case in point, today the Washington Post released this poll with the headline, quote, Trump's Iran war reaches Iraq and Vietnam era disapproval levels. And it actually gets worse for Trump from the headline. The poll finds that 61% of Americans say that using military force against Iran was a mistake. 19% of all Americans say the U.S. actions in Iran have been successful. 19%. That's less than half of the self-described MAGA coalition that voted for Trump. For Americans already worried about their economic burdens and paying their bills, paying for food and gas and electricity, their fear and anxiety and the damage that Trump has done to the economy has tapped into something visceral, and it does not appear that it will recede anytime soon. 60% of Americans say they believe Donald Trump's war has increased our chances of the country heading into recession. Donald Trump's unforced error in Iran driving his poll numbers to their lowest ratings since he entered the political arena, with seemingly no end in sight, is where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Newly minted MS Now military analyst. I love that I get to say that. Lieutenant General Mark Hertling is here with us. We're so lucky and happy to have you in the family. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. Also joining us, Media Matters for America President Angelo Carusone is back with us. We are equally happy to have you back today. And joining me at the table, New York Times opinion writer, political analyst Mara Gay. We are most happy to have you and have you here at the table. What's interesting is that, and I mean, Angelo and I have had this conversation for as long as I've known him, is that Trump defied gravity. Like it is as central to his political identity as anything to be immune from things like unpopularity or a base that will weigh in or render judgment. That, and I don't know what the future holds, but that period seems to be over.
Well, there's no question. The base seems to be collapsing in on the president. And I think a lot of this has to do with just how far Americans have fallen from a place of security in their day-to-day lives. It is remarkable if you look at all of the, there's the polls on the president, but you can also track the polls about what is happening. There's the numbers that Americans are dealing with, whether it's at the gas pump, the rent, housing. It's hard to buy healthcare. Well, Americans are, by the tens of thousands, losing their healthcare coverage because the subsidies have expired, and the Republicans in Congress allowed that. So by every measure, Americans are struggling. Daycare, education, it doesn't end. And I think the White House its response was to go to war in Iran and build a ballroom and start taking away voting rights. So I think there's a growing sense that Donald Trump, has sold a false sale of goods, of bills to his own base. Other Americans saw what he promised, I think, with clearer eyes, honestly. But I think even those in his base are saying, wait a second, I may not have liked everything else, but I thought gas was going to be cheaper. I thought there was going to be more money in my wallet. Mm-hmm. I thought he was going to drain the swamp and bring clarity to the Epstein files. No, he has reneged on all of those promises and instead is, I think, going to war because it's desperate, it's a distraction, and it's making Americans even angrier. And I think it also just highlights the visceral anger Americans have across the political spectrum toward billionaires, toward the oligarchy, corporations that are taking, increasingly large shares of Americans' wallet. And I think that is finally starting to bring Donald Trump's once gravity-defying run to an end. And I do think there's a sense of panic. He's not quite sure what to do. And I think it's too late in some ways to pivot at this point ahead of the midterms. And as we've talked about before, he doesn't care what happens to the Republicans in Congress necessarily, whose seats are on the line. He cares more about himself. But I think you've got to be thinking that this is destroying your legacy, if nothing else. I mean, I would just appeal to him, it's not too late to be a better president. Americans are hurting. You care about your legacy. Just change course now. I really don't have a lot of hope that he cares about day-to-day Americans. At the same time, we know he does care about his own perception. He's deeply sensitive in that way to public opinion. So I'm just heartbroken to see Americans suffering in this way. And obviously, then the Supreme Court decision that came down this week, gutting the Voting Rights Act, that is just another sign that Americans realize their democracy is being taken away. And all the while, the president seems to be perfectly insulated in his ballroom. So the disconnect is growing. Reality is coming for this president. And it's uglier and uglier.
Angelo, there can be, I think the inverse is also starting to happen, right? Like people who've covered Donald Trump's assault on the rule of law and his effort to politicize the military day in and day out for 10 years kind of missed how unpopular the brand became with large swaths of the country. I mean, Trump has been underwater with independents for almost a year. Trump has been underwater on immigration, economy, inflation, tariffs for almost a year. Trump is now more underwater on foreign policy than at any point in 10 years. Trump, I think, is sort of nearing, Bush 43 numbers on approval. He left office at 32%. Two serious polls have him at 33%. This is the third. The country has sort of logged back in, taken the measure of the second term, and said, thank you, no.
Yeah, and I want to actually put an exclamation point on that and also acknowledge something that you were saying a year ago. Because it was a year ago when the vibes were, when Trump had narrative dominance completely, when the rest of the right-wing echo chamber was behind him, so they were spinning his stories. And for a large part of the country, despite the fact that the policies were unpopular, the vibes were great because they were Trump supporters. And at that point, revenge was a priority. And they just loved it. They loved how much he was owning the libs and how much he was making the media mad. And the vibes were great for them. And it felt like he was unstoppable. But the thing that you were pointing out then was that eventually reality is going to have to set in. These people are going to have to drive to work. They're going to have to go to the store. And the policies are so fundamentally disconnected from their lives that even if they have fidelity for Trump or loyalty to Trump, that they're going to have to marry that with the reality of their lives. And what you're seeing right now is sort of playing out in those polls is that a large part of these people, of his current supporters, they're no longer willing to ignore the things that are sort of cutting against them because their vibes aren't great anymore and the costs have gotten so high. I mean, I was listening to the beginning of the segment when you're playing all those people from the Bulwark, and I'll tell you, that sounds a lot like right-wing talk radio right now, the callers. I mean, it's not that disconnected. They're calling, they may not be as sharp. They don't let on some of those people that are directly connected to Trump, although it gets through, but they are griping about the same thing. Because when the Iran war started, the gas price was under $3, and now they're more than $4. And to your point, independents were already there. A large part of the country that are considered double haters, people that don't like both parties, pox on both houses. Republicans are losing them by more than 30 points right now. That trend started last summer. That didn't just start because of the Iran war, like we're seeing with Trump supporters. That trend amongst those sort of movable, more dynamic parts of the voter base, that started a year ago. And so the seeds were already sown. And that's the reality that we're living in now. It's a different context. And to put a sort of a fine point on all of it, a bow on all of it, in many ways, Trump has been extraordinary. He's defied the laws of gravity. He's defied in the opposite direction, too. As you noted with President Bush, it was 8 years before he got to that number. With Carter, it was a whole term. With Trump, it's 15 months.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump's war on Iran is 2 months old, and under the War Powers Resolution passed in the 1970s, today was the deadline for him to end the war, or he was forced to seek permission from Congress to continue it. Instead, today in a letter to Congress, the White House said they don't need permission because the temporary ceasefire means the war has been, quote, terminated. Terminated. Except it's not just that the war is terminated. You have to actually cease hostilities and bring the troops home. And it's not terminated when we're actively blockading Iran and Iran's continuing to blockade a fifth of the world's supply. And it's also not terminated when you experience fueling up your car. Trump's war is, of course, ongoing. Hostilities are ongoing. And it is also increasingly unpopular. 61% of Americans now say that using military force against Iran was a mistake. That's according to a new Washington Post, ABC News, Ipsos poll that's out today. There's more. According to the Post, it took years for the Iraq War, which was launched in March 2003, to reach the level of disapproval that Trump's war has in just 2 months. 59% of Americans in mid-2006 said the war in Iraq was a mistake, while similar numbers felt the same about the war in Vietnam in the early 1970s. That was like 6 years into the war, according to Gallup polls. Donald Trump's insane, reckless, stupid war on Iran is already as unpopular as Iraq and Vietnam. And when you take a step back, why wouldn't people hate Trump's war? It truly has not provided any single tangible benefit to Americans. There have only been costs. Today, the average national price of unleaded gas took a big leap up to $4.39 a gallon. It is the biggest one-day jump since the ceasefire started. The price of gas has risen almost 50% since the beginning of the war. In fact, the biggest winners of this entire thing, the whole enterprise, appear to be the oil companies who keep reaping profits. Just this morning, ExxonMobil and Chevron each announced, wait for it, stronger than expected earnings for last quarter. Who'd have thought? They're doing great. And no, they won't increase production of oil here in the U.S. because that could drive prices down and light them up. Remember what Donald Trump posted 2 weeks into his war as prices started to spike? Remember this quote: "The United States is the largest oil producer in the world, by far. So when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money." That we is doing a lot of work, right? Pretty big tell. Who's we, Mr. President? Chevron CEO? Trump saying, I started a war, it's going to make gas way more expensive, but don't worry, the oil companies are going to get rich. And good for them. Doesn't help you. And this is not the first oil shock we've experienced in this country, right? We have been here before. In the energy crises of the 1970s, gas rationing, where you got told when you could join a long gas station line to pay through the nose to fill up, a devastating global recession, and then stagflation, right? Low growth, high unemployment, high inflation, lives and livelihoods upended. It's almost 50 years later, and somehow our society is still totally dependent on the same energy technology. burning up the fossil fuels, a thing they figured out in the 19th century. Still, somehow, in the year of our Lord, 2026, at the mercy of Chevron and Exxon and the Saudis. How? But, it is different this time. Unlike earlier energy crises, this is the first time this has happened when there actually is an available, ready-to-go, price-competitive alternative. And Donald Trump knows that. In fact, he is literally paying energy companies out of the public treasury, your dollars, our dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to stop building wind farms. It's like fossil fuel welfare. He's doing everything he can to destroy clean energy alternatives and make us more reliant on oil, even on coal. But the thing is, the rest of the world is off in the other direction, embracing the green present. Look at this. This is the exponential growth of electric vehicles around the world. Experts now say much of Europe and Asia have reached a tipping point where people are now buying more electric cars than gas. These charts show what kind of cars people are buying over time in various countries. The red is cars with gas-powered combustion engines. You see, obviously, they dominate early in the chart. The blue is electrics and hybrids. And in Germany, France, the UK, China, and elsewhere, look at China. Look how fast that's going. You can see the red has shrunk, the blue has taken over. Look at Norway up there in the upper left. 98% of all new cars bought in Norway are electric. In France, battery-powered electric vehicles accounted for all of the growth in the new car market in March. Without them, sales would have gone down. Now, that is not the case in the U.S. yet. In fact, EV sales went down here last quarter after the big, monstrous bill, Trump and the Republicans, ended the tax credit to buy them. And to be fair, until recently, your choices in the U.S. were somewhat limited. That's not going to be the case for very long. EVs like these, I don't know if you've seen these online. This Chinese company, BYD, they started as a cell phone company making batteries for cell phones. They became a car company. They make everything now. These Chinese-made BYD cars are projected to soon be cheaper to buy, much cheaper to keep than gas-powered, even here. And what if they're not only cheaper, but actually more convenient? What if, for instance, charging your car to get hundreds of miles of range went as quickly as a stop for gas?
With its latest flash charging technique, this Yangwang U8L went from 10% to 97% charge in 9 minutes and 7 seconds.
In the end, yeah, I was pretty blown away here. The Han L really did hit 60% charge in about 5 minutes. I've never seen charging speeds like that. Nobody has. I didn't think it could be possible. Yet here we are. So BYD's megawatt charging is legit.
EVs start now, basically. This is legit. I mean, it is faster than fueling my diesel truck.
Faster than fueling my diesel truck. Now, you may not realize just how good electric cars have gotten very quickly overseas, particularly in China. I mean, what's coming out of China is truly insane. You know who does realize what's going on there? U.S. automakers. This Ford CEO recently told Rolling Stone that his eyes were opened at a car show in China. Quote, their cars went from clearly behind us to ahead of us. Designs were beautiful. They were electric cars. Chinese car maker NIO had battery swapping capabilities, right? You pull the car in, new battery comes in. It was just shocking, frankly. And there is real demand for this stuff. And it's not just the cars, it's solar power too. Solar installation continues to climb in the U.S. and elsewhere despite everything the Trump administration is throwing at it. Here's the thing. Right now, again, in 2026, all of this technology is out there. It's gotten so accessible. You could even, if you wanted to, rig a home solar system to charge your car for free.
I'm charging my Rivian 100% off-grid directly from solar right now. Let me show you. See, it says it's charging right now. I've got it plugged in right here, which goes to my EV charger. I set these up the other day. It's completely off-grid. No permits required for this. I like to charge my EV up to 70% for daily driving, and that's exactly what it's going to be able to do here. 100% for free, completely off-grid. This is why I love solar.
That's just like that's right now in our country. Just a guy ordered some stuff, got it in his house, paid money for it, just charging his car at home entirely from DIY solar power out of his backyard. Exists right now. Right now. That's coming available at the same time that everything is going to have to move in that direction. And the rest of the world knows this. Asia and Europe already barreling that direction. Pakistan has replaced an enormous amount of its grid with rooftop solar. Africa is doing that too. China is eating everybody's lunch. They're selling the best electric cars in the world. Donald Trump can keep dragging us behind. But in the coming age that's right here, of low-cost, highly accessible alternatives, he is just putting the fossil in fossil fuel. Robinson Meyer is a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. He's founding executive editor of Heatmap, a media company that's focused on climate change and alternative energy, and he joins me now.
It's so good to be here. Thank you, Chris.
So that video blew my mind.
It's crazy.
Because
so
it's
cool.
like, that's off-the-shelf stuff,
yes.
right? Like, he's like, I bought this here, and I have a Rivian.
Yes.
And I put this on. I put him out in the yard. I put the inverter, which is the thing you need to convert it.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild you can do that right now.
Yes, and I think no one gave him permission, right? He didn't need any permits. He didn't need anything other than land and just a willingness to set it all up, and it was all right there. And it seemed pretty easy. I mean, I'm not sure I could do it, on a moment's notice, but it seemed like something anyone could do.
That is increasingly what we're seeing around the world. I mean, what do you think happens from this supply shock we have right now? Every day that goes on, oil remains high. And it's one thing where Americans, which is a very wealthy country in the relative sense, it hurts people a lot, particularly people with lower income who have to drive a lot. But when you're talking about like sub-Saharan Africa, or you're talking about Vietnam, or you're talking about Pakistan, right? Like, what is this? What is the effect going to be here?
Totally. I mean, I think already Fatih Birol, the head of the International Energy Agency, has said the oil industry is never going to be the same after this. And it's so funny. I was thinking back to after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. At that time, Congress was debating what became the Inflation Reduction Act. And you could go back and look at the history of energy policy in the U.S. And starting in the 1970s, basically policymakers said, we need alternatives to the oil system. We need to build up these crazy things like oil, like solar and wind. At the time, they were really interested in fracking, too.
Right.
And what became the Department of Energy spent a lot of money to build up these alternative, what they called alternative energy technologies. And federal support was here and there. They took it away during Reagan. They brought it back in the 90s. But every time there was an energy crisis, there was this idea we needed alternative energy sources.
It would be like we kept like relearning the same lesson. It'd be like, boy, it is kind of a bummer.
Yes, exactly. Well,
like
it happened again in the aughts, right? I mean, there was the huge run-up in the mid-aughts, and then we were like, oh, we got to do something about EVs. We got to do something about hybrids. And we had a few years where we took them seriously, and then we pulled back. But then starting in the teens, we saw the beginning of the current EV industry emerge, but it never really got the support here, in part thanks to choices made during the first Trump administration. What was crazy was 2022, and I think really this crisis now in 2026, is the first time that these are no longer alternative energy sources. These are available. They can power large amounts of a national energy system, and people can turn to them as true choices, especially countries can turn to them as true choices when they're either transitioning an energy system like in Norway or France, or building one from scratch, basically like in Indonesia or Southeast Asia.
The Trump administration, I mean, one of the things that's wild, right, is that Trump made these two different promises, one in public, one in private.
Yeah.
So in public, he would say at every opportunity, your gas prices are going to come down. Oil's going to be cheap. And then he had this famous dinner at Mar-a-Lago with the oil and gas industry and said, you should give me $1 billion because I'm going to make you so much money. And it's like, well, now we're here. We're kind of seeing a little bit of which promise is holding.
Totally. And I mean, he made even more aggressive promises in that he said, we are going to cut your energy bills in half.
Yes,
and
explicitly. Energy bills in half.
One of the craziest promises I've ever heard a politician make on the energy front, right? So he said, he would say things like, we're going to drill, baby, drill, and then we're going to cut your energy bills in half. And he really linked this idea, we're going to give the oil industry anything it wants, and it's going to lower your energy prices together.
Right.
And of course, now we've given the oil industry basically everything it wants. We've pulled out any kind of pollution rule on, existing oil and gas infrastructure, on power plants, on carbon pollution from cars and trucks, and energy is more expensive than it's been in years.
The other thing that we relearn this every time. I don't know if we have a map of the Strait of Hormuz that we could put up, but like when you look at it, you're like, it's so crazy that this little
yes,
the sun goes everywhere. It's like
totally.
It's anyone could do. Well, you could put it. I have one on my roof, right?
Yeah.
Like that is just in one place of the world, controlled by one government right now, kind of two, maybe Oman.
Yeah.
There are choke points like that all over the global supply. And when you start to think of like how close we are to the world in which no one can do that anymore.
Yes.
It's totally insane to architect a world in which you are reliant on that.
I think, well, so first I would say the one place where that isn't quite true is minerals, which is right now China does actually have the refining capacity, and it kind of owns some of the mining companies for the critical minerals that go into a lot of the crucial technology.
That's a good point.
And so, but that could be duplicated. You know, other countries could come up with that. I think the lesson of this whole episode for me is if you are, China, when it was designing its energy system and making policy choices, it was trying to solve a bunch of problems. Some of them have to do with environment, some of them don't. It was trying to say, what if we kind of lost access to seaborne fossil fuels? What if the U.S. Navy blockaded us because of something in Taiwan? And because of that, it went big on EVs. It went big on coal. It went big on fossil fuels that it either had access to or energy systems that it could get, like the sun and wind, that didn't travel by sea. I think the question now is there are far more countries in the world like China that do not have domestic oil supplies, that don't have domestic natural gas supplies, than there are countries in the world like us who have a lot of oil and gas and can buy it on the global market. And going forward, more and more countries are going to electrify.
We turn now to a MS Now exclusive report about chaos in Donald Trump's Justice Department. A whistleblower alleging a senior Trump DOJ official ordered federal prosecutors to, quote, rush through that indictment of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Remember, the DOJ last week charged the civil rights group with financial crimes. It accused it of defrauding donors by using their money to secretly pay informants inside extremist organizations, something the SPLC says it has done for years and was not a secret to the DOJ. Why the rush charges, you might ask? Well, this comes at a time when the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, a contender to permanently replace Pam Bondi as the Attorney General, is making a series of, quote, splashy moves to land that top role. The New York Times is reporting that by firing Bondi, Trump has created an environment in which officials seem to be fighting for their jobs, resulting in ever greater incentive to execute his increasingly extreme demands. Blanche also taking every opportunity to publicly declare loyalty to the president. Watch.
I love working for President Trump. It's an honor to be part of this administration. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and asks me to go do something else, I will say thank you very much. I love you, sir.
Yeah, so Blanche is ramping up prosecutions of Trump's rivals, which have been largely unsuccessful under Bondi, bringing a new case against former FBI Director James Comey this week after the first indictment was dismissed. Now, the Times adding, in bringing the Comey case now, Blanche might be seeking to keep Trump satisfied that his campaign of retribution is in full motion. Democratic lawmakers, though, condemning that case as largely meritless.
I think it's a huge waste of time. I think it's one of the reasons so many experienced and seasoned prosecutors are leaving the Department of Justice. I think the lawyers who are pushing these kinds of cases really should be held accountable.
Meanwhile, another contender vying for Trump's Attorney General nod, D.C. U.S. Attorney General Jeanine Pirro, making splashy moves of her own, trying to get some attention, preparing an appeal after a federal judge quashed the DOJ subpoenas into the Federal Reserve Chair's Jerome Powell, despite Pirro announcing that investigation was actually shut down.
When a federal judge believes that he can stand in front of the door of the grand jury and prevent a prosecutor from going in, when the United States Supreme Court has said a prosecutor can go in on suspicions or rumor, we've got to appeal that decision.
Well, GOP Senator Thom Tillis, who refused to advance Trump's new Fed chair nomination until the probe was dropped, said in quote part, "I have been assured the appeal is simply to challenge the basis for judging on the motion to quash the subpoenas. It would not in any way constitute a basis for reopening the investigation." He is not backing down, Tillis issuing another ultimatum, this time for Attorney General, saying he will not support any candidate who, quote, equivocated on the January 6 rioters. Now, that could cause another block, considering the Attorney General contenders are staunch Trump loyalists, and Trump himself has pardoned those very same rioters. Joining me now is Ankush Kadori, former federal prosecutor and senior legal writer with Politico, and Juanita Tolliver, MS Now political analyst and award-winning author of A More Perfect Party and host of the Archival podcast. It's great to have both of you with us. Ankush, I'll start with you. We have the rushed Southern Poverty Law Center indictment. We've got the new Comey charges and the appeal of the judge's order blocking those Powell subpoenas. Are these attempts to garner favor for the Attorney General role? Is that what is happening here? Is this purely political for people contending for that top job?
You know, it's hard for me to say what's exactly in each of these people's minds. Certainly, it's all consistent with an effort to sort of audition for the role. Todd Blanche, none of this is new for Todd Blanche. He's been conducting himself like this the whole time, even while he was under Pam Bondi. He's really not that different from her on any of the merits at all. The cases are tenuous at best. I think the Comey one is borderline frivolous. The SPLC case, I mean, I was a criminal fraud prosecutor, and the idea of charging that case as a criminal fraud case is sort of beyond the pale to me. As for the Powell subpoena issue, Pirro says that they have to appeal that. I don't see any reason why, except that she is trying to make a point for the president. I would just say something as to Tillis, if you don't mind. I will see where his sort of convictions sort of finally land. I mean, he was the deciding vote to get Emile Beauvais out of the Judiciary Committee and onto the appeals court of the Third Circuit. Beauvais should not have been in that position either. And he, like Todd Blanche, of course, defended Trump throughout all of the criminal cases, including the criminal case surrounding January 6th. So if that is the standard, I don't really see how Tillis could vote to advance even Blanche. So I agree. I mean, there's a lot of kind of hand-waving going on here, a lot of cases that are tenuous at best. And I don't think they're going to get any better. One very last, sorry if you don't mind, point of clarification.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I left Politico recently, very happily.
Right.
So I just wanted to let folks know.
No, good to get on the record correctly with that. Juanita, to pick up on the SPLC report for a second, Jamie Raskin says the DOJ is, quote, bringing cases without probable cause or any reasonable expectation of winning at trial, and saying, quote, the onslaught of bogus cases is to intimidate and stifle criticism of his administration's policies. Your thoughts?
I appreciate Representative Raskin for highlighting that explicitly and this report around the whistleblower, because not only is he amplifying something that has been covered up in this investigation, but also he's counteracting the national narrative that Trump, Blanche, and Patel have been promoting since these charges, since this indictment of the Southern Poverty Law Center. We saw that ridiculous press conference from the FBI officials and the DOJ officials, but also Donald Trump in an interview ignoring the interviewer's questions just to pile on the Southern Poverty Law Center. The goal here is to set a public negative narrative, cause them harm, disrupt the work that they've been doing for decades, largely in tandem with the FBI up until, I think, October 2025. And so it just highlights how this is politically motivated. It highlights that the point here is to cause pain, to damage their reputation. And I think a large part of it is motivated by some of the groups highlighted by the Southern Poverty Law Center being groups that are aligned with Donald Trump, being groups that are aligned with this White House, whether that's Moms of Liberty, Proud Boys, whoever else was on their list. But this is part of that package retribution. And again, I go back to Representative Raskin highlighting this because what's critical when an organization or an individual is targeted is that they have public support behind them. And Raskin is providing that by blowing the lid on this report with the Southern Poverty Law Center, the case being rushed. And since we know that winning is not a priority for this administration, it highlights the political harm that they're attempting to do.
The only thing dropping is Trump's poll numbers. The president claims without evidence that prices will come down when the war is over. Also breaking tonight, the White House is now telling Congress that the war has been, quote, terminated in a last-ditch effort to avoid a war powers vote, because the law says the president is supposed to get congressional approval for military actions lasting longer than 60 days. We are at day 60.
Okay,
That's
so
right.
Michael, you
That deadline was
described...
today.
You described the inconsistency in the messaging that we are hearing from this administration. One of the things I noticed, Eugene, though, is they are consistent on one front, and that is that Americans are freaking out, and there's no reason that they ought to be freaking out. And that, to me, is a sort of curious political message to deliver in advance of a midterms where affordability is going to be a key issue, because gas prices are what they are. The president and his administration have made their choice on what is happening in Iran. There is a certain reality there. They could still, though, Eugene, say, we know you're feeling the pain, and we are feeling it too. And that is why we are going to do everything in our power. We're going to use every tool we have to bring down the price of gas, because there's the reality, and then there's the reality of an administration that cannot say, we feel your pain. We know what you're going through. You're exactly the type of person that we're here in Washington advocating for. And I think, Eugene, that politically going into midterms is a self-inflicted wound.
You mentioned that it was curious. That's very nice of you. Per usual, very classy. It's raggedy. It's a weird choice to go into a midterms saying to the American people that what is leaving your pocket is not leaving your pocket. And even if you watch all this money leaving your pocket, it's okay, because at the end of the day, it's short term. The American people have been dealing with short-term pain for years now. Rising healthcare costs, the grocery prices being high, you add gas on top of that, and everything else the American people have to pay for. And it's much more difficult to live in this country. When you think about it, if this Republican Party, especially if Donald Trump, were making better choices, they'd have to live in the reality, actual reality, not the one that Donald Trump tries to create. And that is the key to Donald Trump. Understanding him is that he is always trying to create a reality and making people live in it with him. It is fine when you are in New York selling buildings and putting your name on buildings. Is a whole other thing when the American people's daily lives are at stake.
But Donald Trump created the reality, and everybody's stuck in it. Donald Trump came out of the gate telling his staff and everybody at the Pentagon and everywhere else, oh, this is going to be short. 3 days, people. I remember it. I don't know about y'all. He said 3 days. So when he tells you that that's when something's going to end, everybody is playing to that. And they can't get out of their own way now because Donald Trump created that reality. And everybody's now stuck in it. And the American people are letting them know just how mad they are about being stuck in Donald Trump's reality. Let's bring in MS Now political analyst and Democratic strategist Cornell Belcher. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So, what you doing?
I'm hanging out here with your brothers.
It's not the black ladies' courtroom, but we're close.
Very close.
Look, this. I mean, I think Alicia raises a very, and Eugene as well, a very interesting point about reality. And at the start of this, the reality was what Donald Trump said it was going to be. He told us, "Oh, I'm doing this. We're done in 3 days," right? And then here we are now on day 60. He's run up against a war powers resolution, right? Which now supposedly he's got protests in the streets on everything from the economy to immigration. And so they're still peddling this lie, this bold-faced lie that, this will be over soon.
Well, at some point, you think, to your point, it is ragged, because at some point you think they do have to actually pivot. It's an interesting thing, because I'm a numbers guy, so that's why you have me on the show. You showed that the numbers from the Washington Post poll at 61% disapprove, but you know what's really important are the independent voters.
Yeah.
And you got over 70% of independent voters disapprove of the war. And when you look at around the economy, you got in that Fox poll, I think you had close to 80% of independents disapproving of his job around the economy. And even before prices went up, Eugene, it wasn't like Americans were feeling good about the economy, even before the turbocharging of the war. So when you look at where independents are right now, and this is really interesting because I haven't seen this before. You know, your team has always had the approval on the economy, or sort of position as better economy. Odd thing happened over the last couple of weeks, and that's Democrats have taken a couple of points advantage on the economy. And this is something going back through the 2000s, Bush, even in our re-election with Obama, when you ask voters who would do a better job on the economy, Romney or or Barack Obama, Romney had the advantage on that.
Yep.
So that Republicans have now lost a key advantage on the economy shows that they're not only is it not working, but it's disastrous. And at some point, you got to think, if you're a House Republican sitting in a swing district, at some point, you got to see this messaging isn't working. And you've got to try to figure out how you pivot.